I'd like to bring the Architectural Board of Review meeting for February 22nd to order. First item on the agenda is public comment. Any member can speak on an item not on the agenda for up to 2 minutes. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to speak? Seeing none, I'll close public comment and move to approval of the minutes of the Architectural Board of Review meeting for February 8th.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes. Second.
First by Paul, seconded by Gary. Under discussion, do we have any comments about the minutes prior to item number 1? Item number 1. Item 2. Item 3. Item 4. Item 5. Item 6. And I wasn't here for that. Looks like the project got denied. Motion to deny. Okay. All those in favor of the motion? Aye. One abstention, Clay. And we have the consent calendar for February 16th. Michelle?
Yes, the consent calendar for Tuesday, February 16th, 2010. Item A, 422 West Padre Street. Was granted final approval with conditions. Item was reviewed by Paul Zink.
That's it?
That's it.
And February 22nd, the consent calendar was canceled. So the next item on the agenda is announcements, requests by applicants.
We can get a motion for the
I'm sorry.
consent calendar
Motion
for the 16th?
for the consent calendar for February 16th.
I'll make a motion.
Paul, seconded by Clay. All those in favor? Aye. Announcements? Michelle?
No announcements.
No announcements, except for people that are absent. A bunch of people are absent. No, isn't that an announcement that a bunch of people are absent?
Oh, well, yeah, we can make that formal announcement that Keith Rivera, Carol Gross, and Chair Christopher Manson-Hing will be absent from today's meeting.
Any subcommittee reports? None? All right. That was a record, general business. So we're on to item number 1, which is 4200 Calle Real.
Yep, that's on.
These are just responses to our comments, and you're going to go through these?
Yes.
All right. Your names for the record.
I'm Ashley Sizo, with City of Santa Barbara, Public Works.
Jessica Grant, Project Planner, Public Works Department.
I'm Billy Goodnick, Parks and Recreation.
Okay. All right. Do you want to go through the comments?
Sure.
Is that what, Michelle, you didn't give me the comments. You just want me to refer to theirs? see how long they are. Do you want to just do them one by one, or do you want me to read them and then you address them? So let's do one by one.
Yep. That'll be
Sure.
perfect.
Good to me.
Right, so we didn't plan a formal presentation for today, just wanted to go through each of the different comments from the last meeting back in December. And we addressed those in the memo for this resubmittal. So we can start with the first comment, which was about the intersection of the bike path and the existing path at the corner of 154 and Kyriel. There was some concern about the radii being too tight at that location. So our transportation operations and engineering divisions reevaluated that corner, and we have softened the radii. We have softened the radii to help facilitate bicycle turning movements. However, we didn't want to make them any larger than we have them shown because we do want to slow particularly bicycle traffic at that location, because when they come down from the existing
Want to show us
path.
where that is?
Oh, sure.
This is at 154, right?
Right. So these were the radii that were being brought to attention. So we've widened these out a bit. There was some discussion about possibly widening this corner here even more to create almost a free right turn. But we did not want to do that from the safety perspective of we don't want bicyclists coming down the existing pathway and being able to continue down this hill, which is relatively steep along in this area. So we do want to slow the traffic before they make the turn to continue down that steeper grade. And the radii that are shown are consistent with the recommendations put forth in the AASHTO design guide for bicycle facilities.
All right.
And the next comment was about the landscaping surrounding the memorial bench and dedication stone. And it should be shown 16 on page 16. So Billy made some enhancements to this area. We added some additional plant species to increase variety and interest to the area to really draw attention to it. And Billy, if you want to describe what's...
Yeah, again, we're working with a plant palette here that has to be relatively bulletproof and fit with a mostly native theme. So in this area, a little bit more complexity, a couple of species of plants. We have the, looks sort of like lavender, a plant, a form of verbena. And then the other plant at the base, we've got pictures of them here, is that's the verbena, and this is a native buckwheat. So in there, plus the ground cover that comes in from the side, and then back behind it, trying to remember the palette here, agave, which will take partial shade underneath here, is going to be kind of a dramatic large leaf look. So I think it gives it a little bit more kick here. And then back behind that is... I'm sorry, that's the buckwheat that goes at the base. This is the giant buckwheat that sits behind it. Not that everything flowers all at once, but there's a lot of textural variation, as well as just the forms fitting it in here. So,
What's this?
that crosshatch, that's just decomposed granite, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And then the same plants that are over here, we pulled the same palette across this way, so there's a sense of all of this being enhanced before it simplifies going out in the two other directions.
Okay. All right. Number 3
Okay,
is the La Colina Road terminus.
right.
Provide a new solution for the bike path to the La Colina Road terminus.
Sorry, Ashley, that's okay.
Is that where the planting is?
Yeah, we can look at it there. So again, City Traffic Operations and Engineering Divisions reevaluated this terminus, and as you'll recall, previously when we presented this project, the terminus was on La Colina Road, where the existing path currently ends. And after reevaluating the way it was set up, we decided that it would be beneficial to actually end the path on Verano Drive because this is a dead-end street. There's virtually no vehicular traffic on this portion of Verano Drive, and it would really eliminate or greatly reduce the number of potential vehicle, bicycle, and pedestrian conflicts. And bicyclists can easily get on the road and continue on the on-street bike path or bike lane that's on La Colina Road toward the elementary and junior high schools down on La Colina.
And the plant material was selected to be kind of thick but still stay low so it doesn't create any visual obstacle looking out this way. This is a really dense grass, gets about knee-high and grows not quite like bamboo but grows with stolons, so it spreads underground. And then the Baccharis is also a very tough woody ground cover.
And right, the existing concrete pathway in this portion will be removed.
Okay.
And
Number 4, at the new curb cuts at La Colina, study softening the radius, transition to the existing sidewalk, and increase the landscaping at the new parkways.
right, so that comment was about this area here, this transition back to the existing sidewalk. And when the path was configured before, we had the same reconfiguration with the new sidewalk meeting back up with the existing. That's gone on this side of the road now. But we did increase the radii, the transition over here, and put in some landscaping in the parkways there to address that comment.
All right. Number 5 is provide additional information on the dirt and gravel decomposed granite at the shoulder areas of the pathways.
We had initially proposed to include decomposed granite shoulders along the entire new pathway along Calle Real, and to install new DG shoulders along the existing pathway. And after some reconsideration, we decided that DG was not an appropriate material for the shoulders, and especially in the portion of the pathway where it's steep and erosion would be a concern, and increased maintenance would be a result of installing the DG. And we're now proposing graded dirt shoulders, which are commonly used and adhere to the AASHTO guidebook for the design of bicycle facilities. And the main purpose of the shoulders is to provide additional clear width from obstacles and to make particularly bicyclists feel more comfortable. And so we've achieved that by providing that additional width without the erosion problems that the DG presents.
And that's typical everywhere.
It is. It's widely.
I mean, on this project.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. And then jute meshing.
Oh, right. And if it's needed over on the steep portions of the path, we can look at doing some jute meshing or some native ground cover just to help stabilize those shoulders.
Okay. Number 6, utilize a simple colored concrete wall with a simple concrete cap for the retaining wall along the bike path.
Seems pretty simple. We'll incorporate that.
Where's it noted on the plan?
Do you didn't you have a section or an elevation in that wall previously which is why we made the comment? So you changed that drawing.
You'd brought in just photo samples of.
Oh, you did.
Right. It was
Okay.
just to get your input on the type of treatment on the retaining wall. Nothing on the actual plans has changed. And once we've decided on something that adheres to this recommendation, we can present that back to you.
Okay.
But we won't be utilizing any stone facades or anything like that.
And then number 7, provide on the plans the locations for future lighting and pre-install conduits
And
possible.
yes, we have investigated the idea of installing empty conduits along the pathway to provide for a future lighting project. However, we were unable to find any clear design guidelines for path lighting that wouldn't require hiring an electrical engineer. And because of the grant timeline that we're on, needing to utilize the grant funds as well as the project budget, it's going to be cost prohibitive and schedule prohibitive to hire an electrical engineer to provide that work.
So you're
at
not
this
doing any
time.
lighting? That's basically what you're saying?
Yes, and it is not. It's not a requirement for this project.
Okay. Number 8 is provide additional information at the terminus of the bike path to Cayo Real and how to address the slowdown of bicycle traffic at the intersection for safety purposes.
So if we go to page 14, we've reconfigured the intersection of the proposed pathway with the existing sidewalk near the driveway to St. Vincent's. And what we've done is we've turned the pathway to create more of a right angle intersection, which will cause bicyclists to need to slow down as they approach this intersection, which will be signed as a stop for the bicyclists on the path. It will also be signed with all the advanced warning signs per the MUTCD. And what we've also shown here, which is an addition from last time, is a stamped concrete treatment near this the path intersections. It was also included at the terminus at Verano Drive, and these stamped concrete rumble strips, which will be a tactile cue to bicyclists that they're approaching an intersection and that they need to slow down and stop.
All right.
And I think that
Is that it?
was about it.
All right. Let's see, do we have any public comment?
We have one letter of concern from Miss Paula Westbury.
And is there anybody else in the audience here to speak on this project? Okay, I'll bring it back to the board for questions. Questions from the board, if any.
I do have one question. You're at the terminus of the bike path. The drawings are showing sort of a herringbone brick pattern. Is that your intention, or are you going to do something different? Or is it just a hatch pattern?
It's really just a hatch pattern to designate it at this point.
Okay.
What does it designate?
The rumble pattern.
That there
The
will be
rumble
a,
pattern there?
right.
You haven't selected
some
that
stamped
material
concrete.
yet?
No. And it will be ADA compliant as well.
That's it.
More questions?
I have a question. At the terminus of the bike path at Verano Road, what is the bike? Where does the bike go once it leaves the bike path?
You can turn to that page. Most of the bicycle traffic will be headed down La Colina Road toward the schools, so they can come off of the path. There will be curb cuts here.
That was my question. Is there a curb cut, or is this a 6-inch curb? Is this
There will be a curb cut.
and would
at
it be
this
shaped
location.
something like that? I mean, would it be sloped down, sloped up, kind of thing? I mean, how does this bicyclist get to this paved surface if this sidewalk is 6 inches above the asphalt?
This will
There's already a curb cut.
This will slope down. We'll configure the path so that it comes in, and I think this sidewalk is 5 or 6 feet wide. So we'll that will also be ADA compliant, so that the cross slope isn't too much. But we can bring the path in. This is all new, so we can put in
That's
whatever
my only
elevations
question,
we
because
need.
if this was going to be a 6-inch bump, I know everybody would be driving here with their bicycles, and then the landscaping is going to get chewed up. If your intention is to have them go this direction, because this is basically your dead end, this has to be a smooth transition.
Right. This will be a ramp out to
So-
the road.
We'll have the plans note that.
Okay. Any other questions?
Yeah. Will you be including ADA tiles at the terminus point where we have where it changes from sidewalk from just sidewalk, from multipath?
At this location?
at both terminus. So there and on the Carriol.
Like detectable warnings?
Yeah,
The truncated domes?
Don't you need to? Yeah.
Yeah, as far as the access ramps, the requirement
Here it
is
would be.
to have get
I'm
24
talking
in.
here. Do you
Okay.
not need truncated domes right here at the point for ADA? It's changing from multiple use, which is bicycle, because it's traffic. And if you are, is that going to be incorporated with this plan as far as colors go and so forth?
I would think that if they were required, they'd be required the last 2 feet right here before the edge of the roadway. There will be truncated domes, of course, on these ramps.
Want to look into that?
Yeah, I'll look into that because. Yeah, I'll
Normally
look
on
into it.
bicycle, I see them on bicycle paths all the time before you, from a sidewalk to a bicycle path, because that's
And if it
not
is,
motorized, but it's still vehicular.
and then I think we've been using the terracotta color.
Right.
And then would the concrete be colored? The stamped concrete be colored?
I don't have any details on it at this time.
Okay.
But we can come back to you with those details.
All right, those are my questions.
Okay. Comments from the board. Gary?
I think it's moving along fine. I don't see any problems with it. I think that
The details that we discuss, or that I discuss, could come back on consent.
Paul?
My only comment is just me as a kid driving my bike down this road that I would love to ride my when I was a kid, and I'm still a kid at times. I would love to ride my bike this direction because it's, to me, the fastest and the best way of getting around. Safety-wise, you explained your reason. I understand, so I'm not going to suggest otherwise. But I would guess that a lot of kids might do this instead of trying to make a 90 and doing this kind of stuff, unless I happen to live in the apartment down over there. So I would say the comment that we make is that this needs to get reflecting the little ramp going down or whatever that we talked about. And if the city does not want to connect the two, then that's a decision you're making as a safety. But I believe a lot of bicyclists will eventually create a rut in the road right there. So that is my comment. Everything else I think is fine. The improvements, little tweaks along the way, and getting rid of the DG on the side, that was a good improvement.
All right. Clay?
I'll make just a couple brief comments. I think the changes to the pathway ends are good. This one here, Verano and La Colina still kind of seems hard to deal with for some of the reasons that Paul brought up. But my two comments are, one, I'm a little concerned about the dirt shoulders because of maintenance and them just turning into weed shoulders or, muddy shoulders or something that at the end DG might have been an easier solution or something else. So I'm not convinced on the dirt shoulder idea. I might be the only one. I'm also the intersection where all the paths come together. That was an area that I really would have liked to have seen something done that was celebratory, and it just didn't happen. It's not a deal killer for me, but it's just a bummer to see a potentially missed opportunity in that area. So.
All right. I don't have any comments, actually. I think that this project's ready for preliminary approval. And they're, with the comments that were already made and coming back with details of that wall and the colors of the concrete and your final construction documents. But Would anybody like to make a motion? This would be a preliminary approval motion. Back to consent for final. Or do you want me to?
Do you want to craft one?
Yeah, I've got a couple of notes.
Why don't you craft it and I'll first do it.
So this would be a preliminary with return to consent for final approval. With the following comments, Kathy, to incorporate the required ramp at the La Colina terminus.
La Colina
And Verano. Incorporate truncated domes at terminus, terminuses, termini, if required. Return with all details, including colors and retaining wall details. And how did everybody feel about the comment that Clay made about the dirt shoulder? Is anybody else concerned about the dirt shoulder? I am a little bit with regards to weeds, and I suppose you could control the weeds somehow, but it's a lot easier to control weeds with a DG surface. No, as long as
same weeds in DG.
it'd have the same road base anyway, and you'd have the same weeds. So, how does everybody else feel about that?
I don't have a concern.
Okay.
It could be planted all the way to the edge. I don't think it makes sense. I'd rather see it planted all the way to the edge. I don't know why we need the extra space.
There's not planting along the entire path,
Right.
No.
at all. So it's
really
not a shoulder.
It's really not a
just
shoulder.
dirt, right? That's what you're proposing, is just to eliminate the shoulder, because really you're going from bike path to dirt instead of bike path to DG to dirt.
I think it's because the
It won't be
asphalt's
dirt,
raised
but
above.
it'll be at the correct slope.
Okay, per the
design
shoulder
guidelines.
requirements and the design guidelines. Okay.
It's filled.
Well, I'm gonna.
And we have to be careful of what vegetation, because we have to have certain vegetation clearances from the path.
Right. Okay, I understand. I'll leave that one out of the motion, but just something to consider.
I'll make that motion.
Okay, Paul. Anybody want to second the motion?
I'll second it, but I have something under discussion that I didn't catch.
Seconded by Gary under discussion.
What I didn't catch is on Carial, where the street terminates, it runs right into a light pole. Yeah.
Vincent's driveway.
And I had concerns about how this bike path gets used anyways, of how this intersection gets used, crossing the street and so forth. And as a design review board, I really think that this particular intersection has never been properly resolved. I mean, this is where the accident happened, and we're still asking people to cross the street at this point. I don't think that I still think it's a dangerous intersection. I think
It's dangerous for east.
It's dangerous. If you
East
think
traveling.
about how Jake's accident happened that morning, coming up the hill, crossing the street from one side to the other, we have still created that incident. It's still happening right here, where he could be riding on the traffic side of Carial and now crossing the street to get onto this safe bicycle path with no street light, no street crossing, just out in the middle of an intersection. I think what the city's doing is creating a potential unsafe bicycle situation.
Would you guys like to comment on that?
Yes, I would like to comment. As far as crossing and the way that we are going to sign it is at Old Mill in Cayreal. There is now a traffic light there.
Yeah.
And so for those that are traveling, I'm going to mix in that direction. Is that east? East. That they dismount their bikes, walk along the sidewalk on this side of the street, and then connect with the bike path. And if they're traveling west to...
Where's that happening in larger view? Where's...
Sure. Let's see.
Old Mill is down here. It's the next intersection.
Shows on this
Just a
over.
little bit.
Oh, there we go. That shows it.
So what you're telling them to do is ride on the sidewalk for a block before they get to the bike path?
Not you're not allowed to ride your bicycle on the sidewalk. But
So you
can
think the
walk
kids
there.
are going to get off their bikes and walk their bikes for a block before they can get back on their bikes? Gary's got a valid point.
Right.
That kids on bikes are not going to get off their bikes and walk their bikes for a long distance.
Right.
They're going to stay on the street. And
Yes, our response to that is unfortunate. There's no ideal way to end and begin a bike path. That it's just a lot of it is compared to sidewalk infill that comes in bits and pieces. We definitely explored. The original part of our grant application was to begin the path at this intersection. We are in city right of way, and there is sufficient area along this side to put a path. However, the issue that we were having is crossing to get to this section. And,
crossing St. Vincent's driveway?
And the issue is, we had our traffic operations engineer. It would require an easement from St. Vincent's to go onto their property to get on the bridge, and there are sidewalks on the bridge. But we did do analysis, and there is appropriate sight distance and safety for crossing at that bridge. Unfortunately, we could not obtain an easement from St. Vincent's. We also looked at trying to do a separate pedestrian bridge that's solely on city right-of-way. The issue that we are having is we're right in the floodway, and we're having issues of landing the bridge outside of the floodway. And it would require a Clomar-Lomar map revision, and unfortunately, within the timeline of the grant, we cannot complete that as part of this project. We do have this on as a separate capital project in the future to re-examine that.
To re-examine possibly extending the bike path.
Correct. Because if we as the city feel that it's important, we would love to get it to end at that intersection.
So your approach is basically this is better than nothing, and we should do this now and then look to the future to do. But maybe what Gary's asking, correct me if I'm wrong, is there's nothing to alert vehicles or any bike traffic to the bike path starting. I think that was a comment that was brought up a long time ago.
It was.
Yes.
Is it unreasonable to stripe the street right there? That there's bike crossing? Is it
I know this
unreasonable
came
to
up
put
before.
bike crossing right there?
It's something that our traffic operations did evaluate that, but we don't want to encourage crossing at that section. We want to have the crossing at the signal intersection.
So rather than having a safe intersection that would be lit and striped and signed, what we have is something that, well, we can't build the bike path here where we want it, so we're going to say that without any signage that you should cross the street here and walk your bikes. I think that's not exactly what I call planning.
There will be advanced warning signs for both the bicyclists and for vehicles coming out of the driveway as well as at this intersection.
And part of this project too is public education. Once we move forward in the next phase for construction, we're going to have a lot of outreach through the schools that would use this path on how to use it.
So would there be, similar to the way pedestrian crossing goes, will there be signage that comes up and over maybe a termination point that says do not cross at this point? When we have a crosswalk that's not open, we put something up and we say you can't cross here. It just seems to me like that. And
I see your
I did bring this up last time about this, and I appreciate you changing the other end to go to the stop sign where it's safer for the kids to go through. But this whole project stems on safety. It's not aesthetics. And, you know, I don't think
I agree. I'm still okay with the scope of the work, the way it's been presented. But what I'm seeing as a problem, and I agree with you, is the fact that the project isn't big enough to handle where it should end. It should end farther down the street. And it's not addressing what happens at the ends, which is problematic. As far as this project goes, though, go ahead, Jessica.
They're trying to choose my words. There is a safe way is to use what we would recommend for novice riders is to go along the sidewalk and then to connect to the bike path. And I don't know how else to relate it other than a lot of times when we have bike paths, sidewalks, it's done on an incremental basis. If we had all the funds in the world, we'd have sidewalks at every location.
So what you're
in the
saying is you're
city,
going to have
but-
a sign that says, please dismount your bicycles and walk
Correct.
400 yards to the next place where you can get on your bike. So
Yeah, it's basically a signage that bike path ends.
it's ending and the bike path is starting. And your point is, and it's true, there are some bike paths where they just end abruptly. And there's always going to be a safety concern there for novice riders and people who aren't looking.
Right.
Are you saying you're going to add some kind of signage for the vehicles also to be aware of crossing? Oh, no, you're not encouraging that at all.
Yeah. The way that the new, when the bridge was put in, when a vehicle is turning, I think the top speed that you can reach is 15 miles an hour. It was designed at. And so a vehicle, as far as like for sight distance, is you're not going to be having cars peeling into the driveway, the bridge area. So
No, I'm talking about cars traveling on Calle Real.
okay.
They're going fast. And there are going to be people on bikes
Just,
traveling on them.
does anybody,
Okay.
I think this is a conversation that has a lot of validity, but in terms of, we have to separate, Gary, this,
I just want to, on the same question, because I'm looking at this, and here we got the city right-of-way.
Right.
If we look at the plans of where the city right-of-way, it's all the way over here. So you're telling me that in the city right-of-way, we can't extend that bike path through?
Correct. Unfortunately, I don't have the exhibit. I could go back to my
you need
office,
an
but yeah, there's
you need an easement to go through the right of way.
to swing around from where the path would. Can I have that?
yeah. But put it on here to point.
Sure. This is the bridge abutments right here. The way the city right of way. So it the right of way ends basically at that abutment area, and we need to have we'd have to bring in the path this way and then go around
You could,
that way.
there's
And
not.
It's basically, it comes down
possibility.
to 2,400 square feet that we would need from St. Vincent's. And we've had meetings with them, and we could not obtain the easement from them.
Okay, well,
Okay.
I think that it's worth, since we've had this really long discussion and it's valid too, if it's okay with the maker of the motion, I would suggest that we put something in the minutes that says that there's still concern about the safety of the terminus at the St. Vincent driveway, and it's unfortunate that the project could not be extended to address that safety concern.
I'm fine with that.
Did you get that, Kathy?
I can just interject one little comment.
Yeah.
I mean, I hear what you folks are saying, and I agree or I understand. But as an architect on this board, I'm not a traffic engineer, so I'm not going to suggest a solution because I'm not going to claim I'm wiser than you.
Right.
But it is puzzling, like Gary is saying, that something's not quite right here, and that's all we're saying in the minutes is saying something's not quite right here, but we're going to push you through the system, and you, the city, buyer beware, kind of. That you're saying that this is the best solution at hand, and so we're going to take your word on it, but we wonder.
What you've presented is fine to move on, is what we're saying.
Right.
But we don't feel that it's a good ending to the project. And I think that that's what we've stated in the motion. so.
Continuation, a transition to the original bike path, the same thing. I mean, it ends just nice, but it doesn't connect to the next link. And you're always saying bike paths always start and end. And well, that might be a nice sentence to say, but that's what we're noticing, is that it just doesn't connect.
Okay, so we have a maker and a second for the motion. Any more discussion? All those in favor? Oh, go ahead, Clay.
Under discussion, I'd like this to be reviewed by a landscape architect on the board who's not here.
Okay. It's going to go on consent, so there'll be a
wanted-
landscape architect that reviews it automatically because there's landscaping involved.
But we're giving it preliminary approval based on seeing it today, so we don't have anybody here to actually
That's
look at the
true, we
landscaping.
don't. So can we give it preliminary approval for architecture and allow them to go on, but note that there was no landscape architect present at this meeting? That would be another item, Kathy, to review the final planting. They hate it when we do that.
In our motion from last time, we had no landscaping comments. They were more legit.
We did, though. We asked them to celebrate the bench area with certain planting, and now Clay's right, we are giving it preliminary approval. Is there a way that we can state that the preliminary approval is contingent on a landscape architect board member reviewing our preliminary approval for the landscape? Or do we leave that out?
We would just leave it out. We would just say preliminary approval
Of the architecture, of everything but the landscape planting.
and continue to.
So, okay,
consent for
so
landscape.
Kathy, is that item 4 or 5? 4 would be for, and the preliminary landscape approval shall be made on consent by our landscape architect. That's a given. Okay. Okay, that was good, Clay. Okay, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Clay? Motion? Abstain? Any abstentions?
I'm opposed.
Opposed? So we have two approvals, 1 abstention, and 1 opposed. So motion carries.
What happened?
Gary abstained. You opposed? You abstained? Oh, you opposed. Okay. So motion fails. So
Thank you.
Kathy, you want to read the motion?
Preliminary approval of architecture, continued indefinitely to consent calendar. Incorporate the required ramp at La Colina Road and Verona Street. Locate the truncated domes at the terminus, or termini. Return with all the details regarding the color and retaining walls. The board still has safety concerns regarding the terminus at Calorial and St. Vincent's driveway. It was understood that there was no landscape architect available on the board for review of landscaping. Zink and Moselle. That is the those are will of the motion makers.
All right. So do we have an alternative motion? Would anybody like to take a stab at an alternative motion?
Take a stab at it. All the following items the previous items that you said, with the exception of the reservation of the intersection at Kyriall. And I would say that it is to be continued, and the applicant is to prove to us and look at extending the bikeway through the St. Vincent driveway area in what appears to be the city right-of-way, and terminate in a safe manner with signage and crosswalks on Kyriall.
Do we have a seconder for that motion?
Chair, clarification. Gary, is that a continuation back to consent or back to full board?
I would say that it could go back to consent.
I assumed it would go back to full board.
I'll second it if it's going back to full board.
Okay, we have a seconder.
Full board.
Under discussion, I have one item of a question for Gary, actually, the maker of the motion, that they've already said that they could not obtain that, at this time, they could not obtain that easement, and they looked at it.
I did hear the applicant say that, but from what I'm looking at the plans, it's in the city right-of-way, and what she described was going outside of the city right-of-way. And I would see that there must be some type of way to do that within the city right-of-way.
So what you're suggesting is that they look at, for that portion of the bike path that starts at St. Vincent and travels west to the nearest intersection, that there's a two-way bike path within the right-of-way.
No. I suggested that we cross the street, but I suggested that we crossed here in the right-of-way.
Where does... Jessica, can you explain where the right-of-way is on this drawing? Can you explain where it starts and where it ends?
The problem is the bridge.
Yes, it's
The physical bridge.
The
Is this-
physical bridge.
This is a property line,
Yeah.
and this is a property line.
That's
Yeah, these are two APN numbers. So this is a property line, and then what Gary's saying is that, yeah, there it is right there, city right-of-way. So,
unfortunately, all of our aerials were before this project went in. But basically, where the bridge ends and where we need to connect, we do have to go onto St. Vincent's. It's not a lot of square feet that we would need, but we would still require an easement. We've met with them.
So does St. Vincent's Bridge, where does the bridge start?
yeah, it just
Their
cuts cut
bridge
off here.
isn't, but their bridge is not in the right-of-way.
Their bridge.
The city would not allow the bridge to be in the right-of-way.
Well, portion of it could be with a public works permit, yeah.
Okay? So their bridge is in the right-of-way.
The property line is almost in the middle of the bridge.
Okay, thanks. Thank you. So I'm sure a portion of the bridge is in the right-of-way because it's showing the bridge starting right here.
Right.
And that's in the right-of-way. So
We have a side. Is this a sidewalk?
Sidewalk, yes.
Right here
So-
and right here,
Yes.
and you have a sidewalk that comes across here.
Correct.
I mean,
Right.
you have a
Yeah. The
apron.
Yeah. Yes.
So Gary, what are you saying? What are you proposing that they do?
I think Gary's saying
There's a
Keep
culvert.
going.
Yeah, so there's not enough, there's an open culvert here that hits exactly at the back of sidewalk.
And so you can't, there's not enough
So
room
without building a bridge, a new bridge.
in the
Yes.
culvert, over the
Yes.
culvert.
Yes.
And that's why you were saying that because of the sidewalk and because of the culvert, you would have to go around and into the
Right.
St. Vincent's property.
Right.
so. There's a path over here. Is what you're talking about? Or
So
would it
we
go like this?
there is enough room on the other side of the culvert.
To
we
do a
would-
formal bike
We
path.
would need there's private property here that's in the county. We
Put
would
it over
need-
here. Put
Yes,
it over.
I'm sorry. This is a county parcel right here. We would need a portion of their land to begin it. But with the discussions with that neighbor, that would be possible. And then we go into city right of way. And again, there's enough land here to put it, but it's still a crossing issue. So we can either build a bridge, but even that, it's not guaranteed because it'd have to go through a Clomar-Lomar revision because we're right in the floodway. So even with that, we don't even know if it could be done. Or
Okay.
not.
Well,
It's-
I
All
have
right, then can we just do it here then?
okay, I have an idea.
Can you stripe a bike path along the
There
side?
there is an existing bike lane there, and there's an existing bike lane there. Nothing would change.
So you need
So
some
what-
traffic control to get somebody from here to here so that they can go that way.
And
It's a
concerned.
stop for the
We're
vehicle.
concerned
I'm
about
concerned with
eastbound.
this. This is where
We're concerned about this
thing happened.
right here. We're concerned about that.
People
Well, that's
going
going to
this
happen.
So
Anybody who says that's not going to happen has never
Has
been
never-
a kid rode on a bike
Exactly.
for any
And-
extended length of time.
And so why can't we?
Okay, hold on just a minute.
Okay.
Can
Engineering
we
or
have
no
a,
engineering.
We do have that option for experience. You can go there, or you can go from the sidewalk.
Okay. Just recapping. We already know that the first motion failed.
Yes.
So the second motion is on the table with all of the comments from the previous motion except for the comment about there being a concern and moving you forward. This motion is for an indefinite continuance, and the one item in the motion was replaced with an item to look at the possibility of an easement or some way to address the safety at the St. Vincent terminus. So if it's okay for the maker of the motion, could we include as a part of that item and just to make the item state that there is concern and that the safety should be looked at, and that way they will know that if they can't get the easement, then they could come back with some way of alerting.
Well, part of that motion was to have a crosswalk and signage. Part of that motion was
So you
to
already
have
addressed that.
So I addressed that. Now, they may not be able to do this portion of it.
aren't used for bicycles.
Well, then a bike crossing, there's such thing as a bike crossing.
A bike path crossing is what he's saying. The comment was made to, I'm sorry, it's a little loud in here. It's okay. So Kathy, can you just read back that item that Gary changed on the motion, please? Not all the other ones that stayed.
Okay, I believe I have a study extending the bikeway through St. Vincent's driveway, study terminating in a safe manner with sidewalks and, I believe you said ramps? Was it sidewalks and ramps? Okay, sidewalks
And
at
signage.
Calarial.
I think you
And
said
sign-
signage.
There was nothing about a crosswalk?
No.
So it was a study item to look at that. I think that you've heard that there's concern that this very minimal board today doesn't feel comfortable moving this forward. So it looks like it would be a 2-week continuance. No? We have a full, so it
Actually,
would be an
Madam
indefinite
Chair,
continuance.
I would like to ask if the staff would be ready if we did a 2-week continuance versus an indefinite continuance. Would you have something ready in 2 weeks addressing this concern, because that concern is what prevented
We don't
us.
have room on the agenda in 2
But
weeks.
I would actually say that we can say that we'd like to have this continue because they're on a funding timeline that we
Okay.
need to honor and respect.
Okay.
So,
Would you have something in 2 weeks? Would you be able to look at all the possibilities and come up with yes or no?
We had the, I guess, yes, we've had the same concerns that you have, and we've explored all of those, I think, things that you've mentioned during the design of this project, and this is putting forth the best design, and that is acceptable by our traffic engineer. So the only thing that I could promise is to have a traffic engineer explain why it's designed the way it is. I think I've explored the other opportunities.
Well, it's either that or your project gets denied because it's not going to move forward today. It's you're not going to get approved today. So it's either an 2-week continuance if we're allowed to tell Michelle to put it on in 2 weeks, or we don't have any other options.
Right.
So
We
have a motion on the table and we have a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion? Aye.
Aye.
Madam Chair,
Opposed?
did you want me to include the concern of the board regarding safety?
That was Gary's motion, yeah.
Yeah.
That's why Gary made the second motion. Opposed? None? Abstain? What were you, Clay? You didn't say anything.
I said aye.
You said aye. Okay. Motion passes.
Michelle, will it be all right if they can be 2 weeks?
Well, you've put 9 items on the agenda before.
I did.
Remind you, there is a bike path there now, it's going to stay from Unit 20.
Ma'am, you know what? We would have really liked to have heard your comments during the item, and it's over now.
Hearing you, but I wanted you to understand that the reason you don't want the bridge used is because it was built for two-way traffic, and they added the sidewalk. And the sidewalk is very narrow and barely lets people go through. And if you add bikes to that in addition, it's going to be very dangerous on the bridge. And you have to
Okay.
get across the bridge to get to the other side.
If you could state that at the next meeting.
Yeah, can you come to the next meeting? Thank you for coming. It really was an issue, and we really would have liked to have heard that comment in the meeting. It might have helped us.
You know, that culvert thing, we had to do a cantilever sidewalk.
I'm sorry, ma'am, we have to continue item 2. This is, please come back next time. We do want to hear your
Yeah, we do want to hear your comments. Thank you. Item 2, 401.5 Old Coast Highway.
Members of the board, I'm David Fainer. I'm the attorney for the applicant. I'm here today to apologize to you for some confusion that has happened on the applicant's side with respect to this hearing. Mr. Garcia is out of town. I understand that he may well have said go ahead with this hearing, and we last week sent an email suggesting that we should continue this 2 weeks, and we wanted to talk with staff in advance of the meeting and see if we could resolve some additional issues. But because the response came back, well, that's a waste of time and we'll charge you $140, I don't know, it wasn't a real...
To continue the project.
Yeah. So I'll go ahead and talk about what's in this plan, the revisions with which I'm familiar. I'm sorry that the applicant's architect is not here. But previously, at the outset, let me simply...
Hold on just one second. Do we have minutes from the last meeting, Michelle? Would it help if we reviewed for the
by all means,
board?
sure. If you have an
Would help
extra
us.
copy for me, I'd appreciate it. When I realized this wasn't being continued, I raced down here.
Okay, this is a project, a revised proposal to abate violations and permit an as-built conversion of an existing 1,058 square foot commercial unit into a new 3-bedroom residential unit. The site is currently developed with 2 units and 1 commercial space and will result in a total of 3 units. Okay. And the motion stated on 1/25/2010. The reason I'm hesitating is because I don't remember it, and I'm just looking. I was absent.
Yes, you were not
So-
here. That's why it seems so
I'm
unfamiliar
thinking,
to you.
why do I not know this project? And neither was Clay. So
Excuse me.
only Paul and Gary have seen this project. The motion was continued indefinitely to the staff hearing officer and returned to full board. 1, the board is not supportive of the as-built 3rd residential unit and the number of requested mods and therefore cannot support the project as proposed. 2, the board cannot make the compatibility analysis of the project as proposed due to the aesthetic issues, site plan configuration, and inadequate light and air conditions for the as-built 3rd unit. So I take it that the project's been designed, otherwise it wouldn't even be back here.
There was an effort, and Mr. Garcia did, in fact, turn it in with 2 modifications. It was somewhat redesigned, and I can talk about that redesign. There were now 2 required modifications. Perhaps I see a reference to a 3rd, but that's moving some trash cans 10 feet, I think, or something.
That's in the same setback.
It's in the same one. Okay, so the.
Can you, since 2 of us weren't here, you're going to have to present the project from
Let me start at the beginning real quickly. This
Photos,
site,
Michelle? Photos?
this site it has 2 existing residential units that are occupied, and it has an area in the back that is a building that has been in existence since the 1960s. This building has been characterized by city staff as one which is to be used for commercial, office, or storage uses and not for residential purposes. There's a debate about that. I'm not going to bother you with that debate, but we put that debate on hold in order to process an application that intended to resolve all issues that would create a permitted 3rd, an undisputed permitted 3rd residential unit. Okay, that's the background. So, the existing 463 unit 3 is an existing residential unit. The unit 1 is an existing residential unit.
And this is the unit that was as-built.
And this is the area which has been the focus of concern. So, as part of the standstill agreement, there was the applicant agreed to abate certain zoning violations that clearly existed. One of them was a roof that had been added without permits, and he offered to remove that within a month, as well as fill in a couple of windows along the boundary line that had been put in this wall on the boundary line. He offered to do that. He was asked by staff to hold off on doing that and to do everything under one permit. So he would have abated. This is an unoccupied area at this time and has been for almost 2 years now, while this process has sort of wound its way forward and gone in circles a little bit. So if you see this area, you can see there are some existing walls in there, and they are proposed. Those existing walls, there's a bathroom here, and there's an entry to another bathroom here, and this area was both used as an office storage area at certain times and frankly was used as a residential unit at certain times. So over the years, and the residential use of this area predated by 10 years my client's acquisition of the property 10 years ago. So this comes as a bit of a shock and surprise to him that this is a problem. And so anyway, here we are today. He has proposed, as he agreed to do, a residential permit for this area. He has, as part of that, the original proposal called out, or back when we did the standstill agreement with the city attorney on zoning enforcement, we called out 4 zoning modifications that might be required as part of this permit. They were a side yard setback, a rear yard setback. These are areas which have been under a roof for nearly 40 years or more. This area and this area. And which have been in use as occupied space for different purposes for over 40 years. The other one was a building separation modification here and a modification to have uncovered parking. The other parking that exists now is uncovered. There was previously a zoning modification granted by the city of Santa Barbara with respect to other units that made the parking, that allowed the parking to be uncovered. This is one of those unique, unusual, difficult sites. It is not visible from the street, except if you look right up the driveway, you can see the front of this building. This is at the back of a piece of property. If you look at the site plan, you'll see that Old Coast, this is not on Old Coast Highway. It is, I'm not sure I'm finding it, but there is actually
this is the site plan right here.
A commercial, but there is, okay, there's a building here. This is Old Coast Highway. There's a building here. There's a parking lot for this building here. This area is shared. It's used for ingress and egress, and there's also a parking easement on it for this property. The only view of this property is up this driveway if someone turns their head really quickly as they drive or walk by and they see this building.
Can you explain
Yes.
what's going on around the property?
Yes, let me do that. So there's some sort of a commercial use over here, and I'm not precisely sure what it is. This is a parking lot right here for an apartment building that sits about where my hands are. There's another building here, a residential building that's, I believe, a 2-story building. And you have something that's where my hand is that's more of a commercial nature, I believe, in the area, and then the residential stuff in the back. Not unlike what you see on this property. That's the way I recall this property. I know this is a residential 2-story building here. So you've got this building. This is 1 story, 1 story, 1 story. It's buildings that have been sitting on this site for 50 years. So
We don't really care about how long any of the buildings are here, because you're here to permit a building that isn't permitted, so you don't have to waste your breath on that.
I know that my client feels strongly. Let me just say my point. It may be irrelevant in your minds, but let me say it. It's an existing building that could be used for office and storage uses without question. So it's not as if it doesn't exist. It exists. The only question is converting the interior use of this building to residential purposes. The owner is willing to have this be Section 8 housing and to provide affordable housing, as this unit and this unit already are. Both of the existing units recognized by the city are Section 8 housing. So the effort was made to design this and try to meet every one of the technical requirements for this zone to have 3 units with the various private living spaces and then the common area, open areas. And that proposal came in last time, and it noted 4 modifications: the uncovered parking, the building separation, and the 2 interior setback modifications. So as we left the meeting last time, and perhaps we left it in some state of shock and confusion, but as we left the meeting last time, we understood the concern was there were just way too many modifications for the board to support. And I understood that board members were, you got a pretty cursory introduction to this. I may be going overboard the other direction, and I apologize, but you did get a very cursory look at it as if this was something new. I want to point out some things about the way this comes up on your agenda. Before it said it was a proposal to abate violations. Well, that's not exactly right. The applicant's going to abate the violations whether this is approved or not. He's going to fill in the windows and he's going to take off the roof that are there without permits. And that would be done and would have been done in December if he had not been requested to delay it. So the idea that this is a proposal to abate violations is a little bit misleading and casts this in a light that isn't fair to the applicant per se. It says to permit an as-built conversion. This is an entirely new floor plan that's proposed. It was entirely new last time, and it's entirely new this time. Every wall, every appliance, every cabinet would be new, except for one thing. The existing bathroom would remain.
So now we're getting into the meat of it, and that's where you've gone from last week, right?
Okay,
or
so
2
now,
weeks ago.
So what the changes
that's where we are.
the changes that have happened since 2 weeks ago
Good.
were to first put a connection here between these two buildings.
Okay.
This connection is depicted elsewhere in the plans, and as I say, I'm not the architect, so it shows here, but I was going to show you.
Proposed roof.
Yeah, the proposed roof is there, and it is depicted in one of the elevations.
It's right there.
So this is an effort to delete one modification, because the concern was there were too many modifications. The second change was in response to comments made from board members about concerns about interior light and the like in this unit. And so that change was to actually construct this light well area in the floor plan and move portions of the interior walls around to create in this this bedroom has good light. Now the living room will have light. This bedroom has light here as well as an exit door here, and this bedroom of course has light. So the effort is not only to comply with the building code with respect to bedrooms, people being able to exit bedrooms to the exterior, but to put enough light into this plan. So this would be a newly constructed 3-bedroom unit here. Now there was one.
Wait. You just said a newly constructed 3-bedroom unit.
It would be newly constructed inside the existing building. These would all be new walls, new floors, new appliances. This bathroom would probably remain, but it would be a new unit for Section 8 housing that would be over 950 square feet at least, if I remember the numbers just right. So that's what we would submit is an optimal use of this site and this property. The idea of having office 1,000 square feet with all the traffic of an office and so forth coming in and out of here just seems not to be a very good idea in today's world. Now, it once was an office back here when there wasn't all the other development around. And somehow or another, I can't tell you the history that results in the property line being at the edge of the building. That seems unusual to me too, but it is what it is. So then the other change was to include a carport, a new carport for a car. Let's see if I can, this is, I think, no, is that the carport? I think it is. I'm not used to looking at plans upside down. You all are much better at that than I am.
And then it shows on the site plan too somewhere.
Yes.
So the carport would be here, so it would be
That's correct.
Covering one space.
It would cover one space.
And that eliminates the mod for the covered parking?
Yes, that was the intention.
So you'd be down to... It's outside the setback right now.
The carport is outside the setback.
There's the setback line right there. So you're allowed to overhang 2 feet into the setback for a roof. So he's got the posts shown right outside the setback?
Yep. Inside the setback.
No, outside the setback.
Right, but with a little bit of the roof overhanging the setback. So
Right.
the intention there was, and, you know, it actually, I thought Mr. Garcia personally, I thought that was maybe an aesthetic improvement that he included the particular design of that carport.
Okay.
If you saw that.
What else?
So the effort here was to respond to comments that had been made with respect to the number of modifications as well as concerns about light and quality of living in this back unit. So here we are. I am informed that staff will oppose anything that has any modifications, but I hope that you'll consider the unique circumstances of this matter, and that modifications in this matter with respect to setbacks, where there's an existing building that we're talking about having exactly the same roof line, exists, and there's no debate that it could be used for office or storage uses. So I hope that you'll make compatibility recommendations to the staff hearing officer, and that you'll find that this plan is an improvement. And I apologize that I am not terribly familiar with precisely the procedures that an architect would follow before your board, but
Okay, that's all right.
I thank you for listening.
Madam Chair, I'm just trying to clarify one thing real quick, just to clarify. The building itself was permitted in 1960 as a commercial use. The as-built reference is to the fact that it was converted to residential use without the permit. The proposed construction that they're doing new, that does not have anything to do with the as-built notation. The as-built notation is simply for the use.
I understand.
Okay.
But the building as it's configured and constructed physically got permits
As a commercial
as a commercial use,
which would have been allowed in the setbacks.
which would have been allowed in the setbacks, right? Okay, well, that helps. So does that conclude your presentation?
It certainly concludes my opening presentation.
Okay.
I'd certainly like to reserve the opportunity to comment on
Okay.
any staff comment, and I'll try not to belabor the points.
Okay.
I'm afraid I have, and I apologize for that.
No, that's okay. Do we have any public comment?
We just have one letter of concern from Ms. Paula Westbury.
Is there anybody in the audience that is here to speak on this project? Seeing none, I'll return back to the board for questions. Questions from the board? Anybody? I have a question. It's a question for staff. We assume that when we get projects that they've already been for a modification consultation with staff. And then, so I'm assuming at this point that staff is not in supportive of the interior and the rear yard setback modifications, and that the applicant has just chosen to come forward even though staff is not in support of those mods. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
We've had many meetings with the applicant to let them know how our recommendation would be going before the staff hearing officer. But they have the ability to exhaust their administrative
Right.
remedies, and so that's what they are proposing to do.
Okay. So you've chosen to take the board's comments from 2 weeks ago and address the issue of providing the covered parking space and providing light and air, but you have chosen to disregard the comments about the site plan configuration and the aesthetic issues. And those were, how were you going to?
Okay, I'll answer the question.
Okay.
I hope you don't feel we're disregarding. But as we understand the guidelines for this board, the new permitted project is supposed to be consistent with the appearance of the old project, and this is
Does it say that somewhere?
Yes,
in our
something like
guidelines?
that. Yes, something. If it keeps talking about the colors and the architectural features and everything are consistent with the existing building.
Only if we like the existing building.
Well, I think that it doesn't say that. That may be what the reality is. But what it says is something to the effect that you do something that's compatible with what's existing. And since we're not really proposing any changes of any significance to the exterior to the building, except those which address the concern about modifications, being the carport and this roof extension.
Okay.
We really think that the findings, if you look at the findings with respect to the architecture on the exterior, are supported, and that there's nothing about the project which changes this. Now, is this something that might get permitted as a brand new project today? Probably not. But we're talking about converting the interior use of an existing building, and if we're going to talk about the exterior of the building, the criteria is to look at the current exterior of the building,
Well,
which
I think
isn't
that
really
you're
changing.
you may be reading into our guidelines. You may be reading into that. I'm not so sure that we're charged with making sure that an alteration to a building conforms with what was there. I don't know.
We also have a project that staff doesn't support. So
Right.
we have a project that doesn't meet the requirements of zoning, yet you want us to look at the aesthetics of the building. Quite frankly, I can't support it because it doesn't even comply with the basic zoning ordinance.
Okay,
And
so
staff
we're
doesn't
into
support
comments
it.
now. Yeah, continue, Clay. Go ahead.
Well, it's pretty. I don't even think it's gray. It's black and white. Staff isn't supporting the proposed project. We're an aesthetic board. We're supposed to look at the aesthetics of a project. If it meets the requirements of zoning and complies with the zoning laws and ordinances, then we talk about the aesthetics. But we're not even at that point yet. So, as far as I'm concerned, I can't even look at the aesthetics yet.
All right. No, I'm sorry. Just let us make our comments.
Sorry.
Paul.
I've seen this project before the last time, and I can't support the project because I think it is not what we want to promote as new housing for our community. Our guidelines are pretty strong. When we want to encourage housing, housing has certain types of amenities and features and quality of life issues. And the proposed structure that's going to be in the converted commercial area doesn't have all those warm and fuzzy feeling things that we would like to see in new housing, that new housing stock that's being brought in our town. On a side note, if you wanted to add one more housing unit, it would be simple to put a second story right on top of this element and turn this into a backyard and a staircase. You go with 4 steel posts and you can build something on top of that. This might be the least expensive solution of putting housing in there, but there are other ways of putting a third unit on that site and giving the quality of life issues, the open yard, the backyard space, the things that we, the design board, look at, staircases up and views into people's privacy in the backyard. So there is a solution there, but converting the commercial structure as being proposed is something that I cannot support.
Okay, thanks, Paul. Gary?
Ditto.
All right. Well, we just heard. How do you really feel about it? Jaime, do you have anything to add since you're sitting up here?
What I wanted to do is probably enlighten the applicant a little bit about the ABR's purview with respect to existing buildings. The ABR does, in some cases, deal with conversion of buildings, and the use is an element that they can use to determine what the appropriate amenities are for the building. And as I see it, this building is going from a historically commercial use to a residential use. And are there the appropriate amenities associated with that conversion? And is there something about the conversion that it does not meet the intent of other guidelines for multifamily housing? And so I think if you quantify it in those terms, I think you stay away from the land use decision, which I think is going to be the staff hearing officer's decision. Is this an appropriate land use? And what is it about aesthetically about this project that it doesn't meet your standards for multifamily housing? I think that's what I wanted to mention. If you can characterize those comments in those terms, I think it would be more helpful to the staff hearing officer.
Okay. Would anybody like to make a motion?
Is it possible to address comments or not?
No.
I really don't want to sound like I'm arguing with you, so okay.
You are.
No, but what time is it? We have another project starting in 6 minutes. Okay, go ahead, Clay.
I'll make a motion for indefinite continuance back to the full board with the following comments. 1, reduce the proposed third unit considerably to allow for open yard space around the rear and interior yard setbacks. 2, the board does not support the request for a modification to build into the setback with a residential use. And 3, what was the other one? Well, I'm just going to leave it at that for now.
Do we have a seconder of the motion?
I'll second.
Under discussion?
Are we not looking at the parking in the setback? Because I'm not really wild about the parking in the setback either.
Is that, Renee, is that a modification that hasn't been picked up? Parking in the setback?
No, Madam Chair, members of the board, they're meeting the requirements in terms of location of parking. It was prior to their adding the carport, they were requesting a modification to not provide the one covered parking space that was required.
So you are allowed to park in the setback?
Is that
All of these
showing
cars,
the setback?
1, 2, and 3 are all parked in the interior yard setback.
I think, I'll have to double check, but I think
Here.
it's allowed if they provide
Here, and here.
enough landscaping. Let me double check though, because I was only aware of that space number 6 being.
Oh, and this one.
But
So
those are
only
also
4 and
existing
5 are not in the setback.
I think those might also be existing parking spaces. I don't recall the current configuration of the parking. Which ones are new? Do you know, Mr. Fainer?
The existing parking, certainly if I could look at the 2 parking space, there are...
Parking required is 2 each for the 2 and 3 bedroom units plus 1.5 for the 1 bedroom unit. It doesn't say which ones are existing and which ones.
I
It says
can
they're
point
all
that out.
existing.
Yeah, all 6 of these parking spaces exist today. In fact, what's there now is paved from here all the way across, and paved all the way back here, and all the way back here. And the proposal is to provide yard areas, et cetera.
I think that what Gary's asking, Renee, is I think what we're all asking is that it's one thing to say that the parking spaces are existing. Anybody can say any parking spaces are existing, but has there been some kind of a study done that say historically that cars have been allowed to and that are recognized as legally parking in the setbacks, or is that going to be another mod?
Actually, this is in the CP zone, and the code requires no setback for parking if it's adjacent to non-residentially zoned properties. And I believe the property right in front is also CP zone.
This and this are
That-
commercial.
Would that only be in the instance of commercial use?
It says all parking and
All
driveway
parking.
areas.
Okay. It's a little hard for us to tell because we don't have adjacent buildings again on our site plan. But, okay. So we have a motion. I had one item under discussion, and I kind of liked what Paul said about that the conversion. Paul, what did you say about the conversion not being up to the standards of multifamily housing as we would expect? What did you say? Something like that. It was. I liked that comment.
the current housing stock that we like to promote in town is new housing, has a certain level of quality, and what is being proposed here does not reflect that. And so I think that housing as being
I would say then that I would like to add, if it's possible, for the maker of the motion, Clay, if we could add something that says that the quality of design is not compatible with the level of quality that we expect in new multifamily residential design. Something like that, Kathy. If that's okay with the maker in the second. Gary?
Yes.
One more item of discussion. There's a modification for the trash enclosure in the rear yard setback. I'm assuming that on page A2 that it's
Those back trash cans.
modification being requested is for the recycling and waste cans right there in the rear setback.
Yeah.
I would suggest the applicant remove that modification entirely and look for a new place to put those waste receptacles.
So that would be, Kathy, that on that item where you wrote down that the board is not in support of the rear and the interior yard setbacks, the board is also not in support of the trash being located in the rear yard setbacks. All right. Further discussion?
last discussion item. Because this is an enforcement case, we always like to have it as time certain back. In 2 weeks, we're kind of jammed. So we're going to say a 4-week continuance with staff, if that would work with Renee. And as the applicant, would you be able to come back in 4 weeks with either a revised project or however work it out with staff?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I hope we can work it out with staff.
Okay. All
Thank
those
you.
in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
You did a fine job explaining it.
Yeah. So persuasive, you voted. You voted it down.
You did a fine job explaining it. I won't say that you were persuasive.
Yeah, I understand. the sarcasm. I'm so
But
persuasive.
thank you for coming and not continuing it.
Okay.
Yes. This is the previous comment. That was the previous item. Okay.
You can keep the stuff that have the ones there.
Did we have another item? Or we do. Okay. I thought we only had 2 items. Okay. So the one that was going to get postponed was the second one?
This one.
Okay. So item 3, 2017 Chapala Street.
Yes, I'm BK Rai.
Get you on the microphone.
Oh,
Yeah. Just have a seat and speak into the mic and introduce yourself.
my name is BK Rai. I'm a dentist owner of that property. This is my first time at the ABR, and
You don't mind.
I'm not a technical guy, so if I make mistakes, please forgive me. Unfortunately, the architect is out of town, so I was first in here because of the interest of time. I wanted to be here and also introduce
Okay.
myself.
Well, let me just tell the board what we're looking at. It's a new item. It's a proposal for a conversion of an 1860 square foot commercial building into a single family residence and the construction of a new covered parking space for the existing 1,451 square foot commercial building. Okay.
It is a existing commercial building that we're going to reusing the existing building and repairing them and bringing them to code. That's essentially the idea. And we're repairing the site with permeable paving. We're asking for minimal additions to comply with code. We have on the modifications we have 3. The first one being the
Before you get into the modifications, can you just help us find our way around?
Sure.
Here. So where are we? We're on the 2000 block of Chapala Street.
Right.
And the street is
yeah.
here.
Yes.
And you have 2 site plans.
Yeah.
Yes, there is we have 2 site plans because the architect is proposing 2 different solutions. But we have.
So we want to look at one right now. So which
Yeah.
one do you want us to look at?
Okay, let's look at this option. here.
Okay.
This
and
option,
then-
okay.
So where are we with these? Can you show us where
Yeah.
we are?
Sure. We
Okay, and this is the front of the building, looking at it from the Mission side.
Looking at the bush.
The bush, yeah.
Okay. There's the front of the building.
Yeah. This is the adjacent building on the left, to the left of 2017 Chapala. This to the left of the existing property.
Okay.
And
You might not be speaking into
oh,
the mic.
sorry, I'm sorry. And this is the this is from the opposite side of the street, looking down into the bush. This is one from one end, from the Mission side, and this is from the other side, looking into the bush, actually at the front.
Where's
And
the photos of the building?
There's a
this is the
front.
front of the building. Sorry.
There we go.
I'm sorry. I'm just looking at one picture at a time.
That's the front from Chapala.
Yeah. And this is again another picture from the from the
Shows
side.
this very tall hedge over here.
Yeah.
Okay.
So from this end here.
From the right property line.
Yes.
Yeah. And
This one is just looking at this area right here.
yeah, this is the actually
Side.
this is the existing driveway down here, and from the
Right
side.
here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. And
This is going down the driveway.
yeah, this is going down the driveway. Yes. Yes. Yeah. Well, I want to show some relevant pictures actually.
This is the patio right here, the existing courtyard.
Yeah.
Okay.
And some photos of the back is
This is a rear residential unit back here? Or what is this?
Yeah. Let me see the photographs. I'm
It's an
sorry.
existing, it says existing two-story building, but it doesn't say what it is.
Yeah, it is. They're both commercial buildings.
Oh, they're both
currently.
commercial
Yeah.
buildings.
Currently, both commercial buildings, and there is an existing commercial studio underground. So there's a two-story building, and so this is the picture from the back of that building.
And you're proposing to convert
The front one
the front one to a residence?
No, the front one to the commercial for the dentist office, and this is to the residence. I'm planning to occupy this spot of space for my dentist business, and this is to convert this into a residence, the back building.
so the
Okay, so this is not a conversion. This was commercial, it's going to stay commercial.
Stay commercial, yeah.
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
This is the rear of the front building.
yeah, rear of the front building from here.
Another view of that same building. And this is a driveway. Right here. And for last, we have the parking, the existing.
Yeah, this is the back area here. Oh, sorry, this area.
Okay.
These other photos are just neighborhood.
Okay.
Okay. So,
Okay, so,
as far as the modifications, the existing building requires for medical dental use requires covered drop-off area. So that's why the justification is that we need to comply with code. We require a drop-off point right here in the front. So we're what the architect is suggesting, make a minimal, not to make any impact visually, make a minimal covered parking. So he's given two options: one with the trellis, looking more artistic, or maybe making something minimal, such as this, which would visually have no impact.
And providing some landscaping elements there too.
Yeah.
do you have elevations of that? The one that you're
Yes,
proposing?
we do.
Okay.
Yeah, we have existing option A and option
What is this?
A. That's just a 6
metal
by
beam with, probably color it to match the existing area. Steel beam going across with maybe a canopy as, if whatever, you will go with any positive comments at this point. But this is what he's proposing as a minimal impact structure.
and be covered by landscape.
Yeah. And so he's got, I think that's the other option with the trellis and the wooden structure for the drop-off point.
Okay, what else are you doing?
Basically, the other modification is the handicap parking right here in the front. Because of the, again, same medical dental building. And so it's a portico share and the handicap parking in the front because of the requirement by code. That's the other modification. The last modification is the set. We are encroaching on the setback, which is the existing legal but not confirming on the buildings.
Yeah, since this has been converted into a residence, that's what triggers this mode here.
Okay, aesthetically, what else does your project consist of? Aside from the
well, the landscaping, we don't have the plans yet, but we would take any positive comments on that. And basically, we're trying to make some. Right now, this front area, I think you would see in the photographs, hasn't much been done, but we would like to make them more aesthetically pleasing and matching with the adjacent neighbors' landscape.
The architect wants to provide here permeable paving here, and here. 3 areas, And the footprints remain the same. The only thing that is changing on this building is that we added the garage in the lower level, so we have this element here. I can show you.
Yeah, I'm not understanding what you're doing back here at all yet, so let's go to that.
We can go to the floor plans. Yeah, here is the main level, the existing porch, and we are just changing the configuration of the interior walls to make it work better as a residence. We have the stairs going down here, and if we go to the lower level, you'll see the connection here with the new garage. So the existing footprint is right here now, and we are just adding this. There are the 5 cars required for the commercial. And we have the required distance here, so that's why we decided to design this.
Okay, let's look at what that looks like.
Okay. That's the rear of the front building.
No changes here. Oh, you do have changes here.
Yes. Because this deck, wood deck, is in really, really bad shape. We decided to create a covered carport.
Okay.
The elevations actually didn't change that much. This is all the same here, with the 2 options.
You added what element?
This element here, to match the one we had here. But
you're not matching it because you're removing it.
Yeah, we are removing it, but that's the other side, the same. And this is the building in the back. You can see it's exactly the same.
Well, we can't see that because you're not showing us what the existing looks like and what the new. I'm trying to figure out what you're doing to the building. So you have to.
Yeah. Well, we didn't change anything on this building. We just added this element here.
Just added.
The only thing is that changes the garage in the back because it's required covered parking.
Okay.
So
that's reflected.
Yeah, that's reflected.
Exactly.
Yes. But this.
And that's the front. You're not changing.
That's the front.
Yes.
Yeah. Nothing's changed there.
Nothing's changed there. Yeah.
But the one thing we're going to change is all the windows because they're on, they're very old and need to be changed because it's,
Yeah, and
current requirements.
we are proposing metal clad windows for this project.
Metal clad windows. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Do we have any public comment on this project?
One letter of concern from Ms. Paula Westbury.
All right. And seeing no one in the audience, I'll bring it back to the board for questions. Any questions?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Gary.
The parking of the commercial building, you could not find room for that in the rear of the building?
We have parking in the back, but the handicap parking.
Couldn't find room for that someplace else, maybe in the courtyard. Did you explore that?
Yeah, we have, but here in the front of the building, we need to have the portico shed for the drop off. So we said it all just becomes one part of that. The handicap parking becomes part of that. So it would have to be done anyways to comply with code.
They have to have 6 parking spaces, apparently, and they're underparked.
Another part. 6, there's 5 here and 1 in the front.
Right.
6. If they didn't have the one in the front, they would be underparked.
What if they had the one in the front here?
Oh, back here.
That's what I was saying.
So that's
Did
the
they
question.
explore that?
How come
There's a requirement in the state codes for dentist offices and medical offices that you have to provide covered, accessible pathway from the parking spot to the door.
That's right.
None of the dentists that I went to.
That's the reason we had to do this, actually.
That's why they're proposing it the way they are. It wouldn't work in the back because of the grade change.
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
Okay. More questions? No questions? Okay. Comments? Gary?
Well, I have to say that I truly, really dislike the parking and the trellis in the front yard of this building. And that's a transitional neighborhood. There's residential and commercial. So I'm not really liking that solution.
Is that your only comment?
Well, I can comment further. The building in the back, I don't have a problem. I think the garage is a good solution for that and a good use of that with the topography. And I wouldn't be in favor of the option A at all. There we go. That's all.
All right. Paul.
Ask a question. There is the courtyard space between the two buildings, and that's a required 1,250 square feet open yard that's required because it's a single-family house that's on the property. Is that what dictated that size?
Well, that's an existing space, and that probably was the reason why it is. That's why we didn't do any changes to that at all because of that code requirement. Yeah.
And then your customers are actually going to be parking in the back in the 5 spaces.
Very back.
And then they'll walk up front. And so will they be primarily going to this staircase here, or are you going to try to encourage them to come up to this location?
Generally, because it's a dentist's office, we don't have 5-6 people parking at the same time simultaneously. There's probably one person or two at the most. Especially for what I do, it's probably one person in the morning, one in the afternoon. But I would think that most people will either park here, or if there's a handicapped person, will park in the front. But essentially the entrance would be either from here or from here. So we have shown access through the back as well for the building. So they can park here and come up the driveway here. And there is also, we're showing a walkway here on the side for the building for access.
Yeah, but mainly this entrance will be the most used because, as you can see, we have lunch there and some.
So the pathway through it's access through the back of the building as well for that to the building here. But I would think that the most people will just park right here in the front if there's because there's allowed parking here in the street, so they might park right here and then walk through it. So that's what I would think would happen in most cases. But if there is no parking here, there's plenty of parking in the back. They can walk up. I mean, that'd probably be one person walking. So.
Okay. That's a question.
More questions? No? Clay?
No, we got questions. Just one question as I'm looking.
The dentist office, I knew we talked about this earlier, but now I forgot for some reason. Dentist office is existing, yes?
No, it was a mental health association building. It wasn't an existing dentist office.
Okay, so everything inside of here is also a new tenant improvement,
Yeah.
for lack of a better term.
Okay. This was a question that I'm just feeling like I didn't get the full answer to. The reason that you couldn't put, was the reason you didn't put the carport back here only because you needed the open yard square footage, or also because of the slope, the cross slope didn't work, or is that what?
Also requires a covered pathway to the access, and I think the handicap access has to be to the well, we need to have a ramp going into the building.
Or a lift.
Yeah, or a lift. Yeah.
Or a lift. So the reasons that you didn't locate the covered parking back here were, one,
encroachment into
the open yard space.
Yes.
And two, the change in grade. It was easier to put it up here.
Right.
And three, you would have had to have provided more of an extensive covered deck.
Right.
But not because of a slope problem.
No.
Okay. Okay. Comments?
You already made me make my comments.
Oh, we already made comments? Oh, yeah. Any other comments?
I'm just having a hard time being supportive of the project just because I see it as not, I see how it all works logistically wise, but it doesn't seem to be an improvement where you take a building and you're adding things to it, and at the end of the day, the building looks better or looks about the same. I see some detriment happening to the whole layout, even though I see how it's working and everything, and I'm not 100% convinced on the solution that you have at hand. The solution is having the parking in the front creates a certain, I say, a mildly undesirable situation, because then people get to see the cars, and we try to hide it, or we try to screen it, and you can landscape it. Then anybody going to this front door has to basically pass through a parking space. And I know you're looking at this as a porte-cochere per se. And, okay, you have a path to travel here, too.
Right.
I didn't catch that at first.
I don't even see the loading zone.
Well, he's got his 8 feet probably right here. It just, I'm having difficulties with it because it just doesn't look like, oh, this is going to look really cool. It's going to. So that's where I'm grappling with trying to see how we can accommodate what your request is, because it's a valid situation and an understandable situation, but there's a couple of quirks with it that haven't been resolved that need to get addressed, and I don't know if putting the parking over in the courtyard area, which ruins your 1,250 square foot open yard, solves some of the quirks. I'm not resolved yet in my head, but that's what I'm struggling with is how to deal with how to get somebody to the front door in addition to having a parking here or moving it there. I'm still thinking. But that's where I'm at.
Okay, thanks, Paul. Clay?
I'm struggling with this project a little bit because I've done a dental office a couple before, and I know the requirement. I've also been able to get waivers on the requirement. So you might want to check in and see if they'll allow you to get a waiver for that, in which you don't have to put the parking where you're trying to put it. That being said, though, there is a requirement to do that, and I think that in my mind, I might be the only one, which I often am, there could be a way to make the parking work in the front. It's just, it hasn't been designed well.
Okay.
And it's not, I'm not saying that we should put it in the front. I'm just saying what we're seeing today, at least for me, I think that there's probably an interesting solution that could happen. I'm not seeing it. Not seeing it represented. I think I'd be looking at your existing survey. I'd be more interested to see if you can get it in the back and get a lift that would work, and that might change how you orient your interior layout, because it seems odd to me to bring people in the back door and walk through the lounge and by the operatories back to the reception. So I'm struggling with it because of those reasons. I can see the reason why we'd want to try to get a modification for the parking out front. I don't see a solution that I could see a potential for it working, but I just don't see the design there. So right now I don't support it because it just doesn't make sense from an aesthetic standpoint. I think we got to look at trying to get it in the back area, and I'm looking at the survey trying to see if you have an issue with the slope coming up here, other than the fact that you would be bringing a wheelchair or a person who's handicapped up the driveway, which isn't allowed either. So you'd have to bring them in the back.
Yeah, if we park it in the back, in the back.
And I think that would require you to really consider what you do with your interiors, which really isn't our purview, but something to take back to your architect. I think the solution on the rear building with the parking underneath is good. However, I think the architecture needs work. Windows proportions aren't right, and there's some weird roof on the back side. So I think you need to get with the architect and sit down and really look at the aesthetics of the back building, and then come up with an alternate solution for your parking issue. And I'm going to tell you, it's a fight to get that requirement waived, but it can be done.
I see.
And it has to do primarily with your travel distance relative to where you're bringing an ADA person into the building compared to where they're parking. So if you park them back here and try to bring them around here, they would never let you do that. But if you're parking here and you need to get in the back, and you come in the back, they may let you get that waiver.
I see.
But it's tricky.
Yeah.
I'm letting you know. But I don't see a solution. I mean, again, I could probably see something that could be interesting up front, given that it's probably not going to be, there's not going to be a car sitting there every day. But I just don't see the design there to support it.
I think there has been precedents where such modifications have been made. I think there's a building on, I think, Bath, I don't remember the address, where I think there is a handicap parking in the front of the building.
There actually is one over on by the hospital that I know of, that they put in an ADA lift and all that, and it's not attractive. It was more of an afterthought.
To follow up on what Clay was saying, that perhaps that if you provided the ADA parking here but it wasn't covered, whether or not your dental persons would give you a waiver for that, because then that's less obtrusive, or the architecture of this connection needs to be designed a lot better.
Okay.
It doesn't look good at all.
I see.
The solution that's at hand, and
Okay. Both the options don't look good, you're saying.
parking in the front is not. Yeah.
Gary brought up when we were talking about possibly parking back here, using this, if he had to cover it, he could cover this walkway and bring people around this way. If I was thinking that required a mod, but if it's a commercial, then if it's zoned commercially and he's able to even use the building for commercial, then he may not have a setback. I don't know what that zone is. If he doesn't have a setback, you could possibly park back here and have a walkway coming around because. Go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt.
No,
I
that's
was
okay.
looking at the survey. There's a 50-inch redwood in the side yard.
Oh, okay.
Well, they have a walkway through the center of it right now.
Yeah, I don't know. Are you proposing to remove the tree?
that tree.
Oh.
And I think
You forgot to tell us about that. Do you have a photo of that?
Yeah, I think we have it in the pictures.
It takes up the whole walkway.
Huh?
I don't know, Mark talked to us.
I know that I've seen it, but I don't know if it is submitted as a. I've seen the picture of it.
It's right here.
Yeah.
It's huge.
Huge, yeah. So, yeah.
That's a whole house.
Yeah.
It's huge.
I'm sure it's been there for the longest time. So we propose to remove that tree for many different reasons. I think it is a health hazard, to be honest.
So then, scratch that idea. Then maybe you could do a parking space back here with a lift and reconfigure your floor plan. If you can't get, I would suggest pursuing getting a waiver for that covered parking space. I also, even better would be to locate it back here and do a lift so that this isn't a parking space at all. So from my perspective, I would be in favor of relocating the parking back here, covered or uncovered, whatever you can get a waiver for would be great for you. But reconfiguring your floor plan such that this is not a parking space. It's just not a good place for a parking space, in my opinion, either. And that's my opinion. I have to agree with what everybody else has said, unfortunately, and I agree with Gary that option A, or the top option, is not an option. So, and I think everybody else feels the same way. That I don't even really know what it was supposed to be, but I don't think it would work at all.
Madam Chair?
Yeah.
Can I just ask the board to then comment if you're in the direction you're going and asking them to consider putting the parking in the back, if then the board would comment on the supportability by the board to reduce that required outdoor living space for the residential unit? So that would probably be the mod in that case.
It's one residential unit, right?
Yeah.
Is there a reduction to 600 square feet in the R2 zone?
Well, this is a single-family residential unit, so it is required to have the single-family standard.
Right, so if it's
1250.
I would be in support of reducing that open unit square footage
I would
at the benefit of gaining the landscape and the open yard area in the front of the building. Everybody else agree?
Provided that area is very well landscaped and very well usable for the users of the residential unit.
Yeah, it would be splitting it up, and it would be
Not a remaining concrete patio that's now smaller.
Yeah, what Clay's saying is that the remainder wouldn't be just. This would need to be brightened up and made to work for the residential unit, and then the board could be supportive. So, okay.
Madam Chair, also, let me just clarify. I don't believe the plans, I didn't see it, reflect the proposal to remove the tree, and therefore it wasn't in the project description, but if the board would comment on the proposed removal of the tree.
I would say we need more additional information about the tree, like distance shots to see how big of a tree it is in the neighborhood, and then we can provide additional comment at that point.
I would go so far as to say if the applicant really wants to remove the tree, that it should be on the basis of a liability, at which point I would request an arborist report stating that the tree in its current location and configuration is a problem.
Okay.
Indisputable.
Okay.
Otherwise, I think the tree should stay.
Okay. Would anybody like to craft a motion for this project that is for comments only and it would return back to the full board? Anybody? No?
Go ahead.
Let me try. This would be, like I said, an indefinite continuance back to the full board. And the comments are that the board is not in support of the covered parking space as in the location that it's proposed, and would request that the applicant look for an alternative solution that would either relocate it to the rear of the commercial building or pursue a waiver to provide an uncovered parking space. But the board prefers relocating the parking space to the rear. And the board would require an arborist to report and additional photo documentation of the existing redwood tree prior to determining the appropriateness of its removal. And the board would support a modification for a reduction in the required 1,250 square foot open yard space to get the the 6 parking space relocated to behind the front structure. The board would support a modification for a reduction in open yard space in order to get the parking space number 6 relocated to behind the front structure. And the board is comfortable with the small addition to the rear of the 2-story building to accommodate the required residential covered parking. That's all I've got.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
On the front, there is a 3 modification requests. Did we touch on those? One was, the third modification is for the residential building to encroach 2 feet into the side yard setback. The second one is the parking in the front yard. And the first is commercial building to encroach 6 feet into the front yard setback.
Say the first one again?
The commercial building to encroach 6 feet into the front yard setback with a portico handicap parking area. That's a
Which we're not, we've already stated that we're not in favor of that mod. So regarding the mods, the board is not in favor of.
The interior yard mods are for the
Existing buildings that are already in a non-conforming.
What about the, they didn't mention that the existing building, commercial building is in the 6-foot side yard setback. So is that...
It's one mod.
So
Is
1,
that
2, 3.
Yeah, legal not confirming, that's what I said.
This was one mod, and the parking was one
One mod, yeah, those 3 mods.
Okay, so that whole line, both
Okay.
buildings,
So-
one mod.
So the board is, we've already addressed mod number 1. If it's mod number 1, that the board is not in favor of the proposed location of the covered parking within the front yard setback. We already stated that. Did I state? That was, I think, number 1.
Yeah.
Then that would address mods 1 and 2, right?
Yes.
And then modification number 3, nobody commented on it. I would have to say that it's there's no aesthetic impacts to the modification for encroachment of the existing buildings in the interior yard setback. And I need somebody to make the motion.
First,
and
under discussion.
Clay made the motion. I need a seconder.
I'll second it.
Okay. Paul, and then under discussion.
Under discussion, I'd like the applicant or I don't know what number we're on, but study window fenestrations and massing of the rear building. Specifically, every elevation.
Study what exactly?
Well, okay, so on the rear building, where are we?
The window breakups or the
rear of the building, the roof, and the windows and the doors.
right here? Are these existing windows?
Those two are new.
Oh, those are new. Okay, so that would be an item that says, yeah, like Clay said, study the locations and configurations of the proposed windows at the rear elevation of Building 2. We had a seconder. Any more discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. And that concludes our meeting this evening. Thank you for watching.